All right, everyone. Welcome to Groundwater Talk Live. I am Tom Ballard, the Groundwater Guy, and today we are going to be talking about wells of the Bible with Jim McClain of McClain Shallow Wells in Savannah, Georgia. He is not on here. I just talked to him a few minutes ago. He's not on here yet, um, so hopefully he will pop on. We can go from there. But it's an interesting topic, and I met Mr. McClain at the South Atlantic Jubilee a few years ago. We were both giving talks, and I inserted I used a quote for one of my favorite quotes from the Bible, and there he is. And this one has to do with Isaac finding wells. Isaac was very successful at finding wells. So this is Genesis 26:32, and I use this quote. And he gave a later talk. He had a whole documentary that we're going to talk about today that just kind of put my reference to shame here. But I like to say that Isaac was the first hydrogeologist, and the story is great. I'm going to let Mr. McClain tell you a lot more about that. But let me bring him in here, and let's go from there. Mr.
Oh, we
McClain,
are.
how are you today? There we are. I had to do a
Technology
quick
is incredible.
intro.
This is
Yeah,
doing,
yeah.
doing
So,
great. Let me get over to
so
the middle of
thank
the screen here. It's off to the
that's
side
right.
here.
Oh,
I have a wide
yeah,
profile.
I've kind of done that. Yeah,
Yeah,
it's it's a live show, so
yeah.
you can
Well, I'm
be
alive.
forgiven for a few.
I
I mean, I've done a whole show before where I had no sound. It's kind of like
yeah,
it's just
boy.
kind of like one of those things. Everything can happen when you're live. So, but I
Oh,
appreciate you joining us. And I was just telling how I originally met you at the South Atlantic Jubilee a few years ago, and your documentary, and I'll cue that up, and we'll play a little bit of that here, and we can talk about it a little bit. But first, let's get into a little bit of your background. You got an interesting path to being a driller. I was reading your profile, and you got a degree in zoology, and it's kind of your not your normal path to being a driller. So let's
yeah,
let's talk about that a little bit, and then how
sure.
you got to where you're going, and then we can talk a little bit about your documentary series.
Yeah. Well, as you indicated, there's no water well joint in my past, uh, but you never know where you're gonna meet your crossroads in life. And I always say luck is when opportunity meets preparation. And I was fortunate enough to get involved through my father-in-law, uh, drilling wells, kind of on the side, and just making extra money. And pretty soon, my part-time gig was making more money than my full-time gig at zoology. I used to work out at the Institute of Oceanography here in Savannah, and of course, not paid very well, just looking for some extra income. Uh, I came down to Savannah upon graduation from the University of Washington, as you mentioned. I just wanted to try something different. I grew up in the Chicago area. I wanted to get out in the mountains, and I just wanted to get out of the Midwest and try something different. And during that period of my life, I did a lot of moving and changing. And after I left Seattle, came directly to Savannah to work out at the institute and started doing these wells part time. My father-in-law never really wanted to. He was a geologist, so that's why a lot of my background and my theory is geology based because I learned from a geologist, not from a water well driller. And we had a lot of common interests, but his main goal was looking for phosphate here in Savannah and putting in monitoring wells and soil testing, geotechnical things. And but I kind of took into the shallow wells and said, we can provide a economical, environmentally safe product that's basically taking advantage of a big rain barrel under Savannah, and that's what the shallow wells are. Just water infiltrating through the soil from rainwater. So I've been doing that for 30 years now, and we've drilled thousands of wells, and it's been delightful, enjoyable, stressful, hateful. Sometimes I wish I'd never seen my first drill rig, and sometimes I thank the Lord for the opportunity it's given me. But it's been a long process. I just turned 70 Monday, So when you say
Wow.
alive, I'm glad to be
Congratulations.
here.
That
So
is a
I just,
milestone.
yeah, I was just water well drilling and 70. I never thought I'd reach either one of them. So here I am.
Wow. Well, I'm not too far behind you. I'll tell you what, a couple of years. That's I'm getting up
Those
there
were
too.
big
So
years. A
yeah,
couple of years means a lot when you're 70. So
yeah,
I've got more in the rearview mirror than I do out the windshield. Let me put it that way.
yeah. That's exactly right. But
Yeah.
hey, you know, we can look back and say we had some fun, right?
We have had some fun, and I enjoy my family. Both my children have worked in the business since they were 5 years old, and I used to take them out of daycare because we had so much fun working on the wells together. And they're both kind of moving on now, but they still get involved with the business when I need them.
All right, before we dive in, talk to us a little bit about the South Atlantic Jubilee, where you and I met, and you are president of the South Atlantic Jubilee this year, and so
Yeah,
tell us a little bit about that show and what
yeah.
it's all about, and um,
So see,
I find it
there's
a great show. I like going down to Myrtle Beach to the show.
yeah. Oh, it's a great place. It's another one of those crossroads. One of our members of the board from Georgia had passed, and they were. I didn't get under the table to say no fast enough, so I ended up on the board,
Through the
pointed
short
to the
straw.
board. Yeah, so I got pointed to the board, and you know, it's anything you do as a volunteer. If you care about enough about it, and believe me, these people are the greatest people I've ever worked with at the Jubilee board. You find yourself in more and more responsibility and wanting to do more. And so the opportunity has been has arrived for me to be president now, and that's quite an honor. If my father-in-law Paul Claus was the guy that I worked for, if he was here now and knew that I was that heavily involved in the industry, and my wife's grandfather is also in the water well drilling industry, so I didn't grow up in it, but I married into it. So they're the uncles. They're all involved with well drilling of some sort during their lives. But he'd be really proud, and I hope he is enjoying our little ride that he started me on.
It's a pretty well attended show, mainly geared towards drillers in Myrtle Beach every year in
Yeah,
July. But
it is.
us geologists go down there and give talks, and so there's a show, there's talks, and a lot of social stuff. That's
Yep.
the driller community likes their little the dinners and the social stuff too, and the family oriented stuff. So it's a lot of fun actually. Oh,
Well, it's a great opportunity for you to get in touch with other people in the field, not the continuing education we now call it professional development. We try to implore upon the drillers the importance of keeping up with state of the art knowledge and opportunities. But the chance to get together with your salespeople in a more relaxed atmosphere than the typical sales uh, mode you're in, if you're able to meet up with those people and have the dinners, go to the parties, we stress the family. The Jubilee is a family event. We want you to bring the children, your spouse, be it wife or husband. Some of the people I meet down there have been coming there for 40, 50 years, and so sometimes 3, 4 generations all in one spot. The granddaughters all the way up to the grandmothers are there to enjoy the show. And I asked one young man, I said, well, Jubilee, how many? Oh, I've been here 2 or 3 years. He's like 11 years old. And he says, what's your favorite part? He says, the food. He
there's
says
a lot of
he
food, yeah.
loves the food. So you get great opportunity for that. We've got the picnics and the petting zoos. So I encourage everybody to end of July. I think it's 25th, 26th of July, Myrtle Beach. If you had a chance to go, please do me the honor of coming up to me and introducing yourself. Say you met me on the podcast. Uh, and if not, we're all wearing the Jubilee shirts. I've got one over here someplace. But come see me. We'd welcome you to the Myrtle Beach show. Glad to see you.
All right, South Atlantic Jubilee. Okay, let's
Yep.
dive in a little bit here. I've got this. This is actually your video. You've done a documentary series, and Wells of the Bible is one of them. We're going to talk about that a little bit, but I'm going to show kind of um, uh, the. Let me see. We got a comment here from. Kind of move that around a little bit so we can see what he says. Uh, so
Yeah.
Eddie had a comment.
Yeah.
He likes the South
Yeah.
Atlantic Jubilee. So
Oh yeah.
this is the link you're on Rumble here. This is the actual video documentary. We're not going to show the whole thing here, but I'm going to show you a little bit, and then we're going to talk about how you made this and some of the background here. So I am going to, and sometimes doing video into video on a live stream, the sound can get a little funky. So hopefully that will not be the case. But let's just play this here. See if we can get her going.
I might mention at this time that am I still in audio? Probably not.
Yeah.
Okay. That Eddie Ron, my my developer of this documentary series and the video expert in all of this, has done a fantastic job putting this together for me. It was my inspiration, but his idea that we do something like this. And my primary goal, Thomas, is to, I don't think well drillers as a whole understand their place in history and the importance of what we do and the importance of how clean water throughout the planet is such a valuable resource that should not be taken for granted or abused. So this documentary series is just kind of the beginning of an educational awareness for the water well drillers. Now we use it for all types of groups, but I designed this primarily for water well drillers to understand what their importance in the world is. So there's no audio with the.
Yeah, the
Okay,
audio
yeah,
does
yeah.
not look like it's playing through. I tried it
Yeah,
earlier and I thought I got the audio to work, but people are seeing the
yeah,
visuals anyway, and we're not going to play the whole thing because we're going to talk a little bit about it.
yeah.
But
Sure,
people can see the
sure.
visuals, which are stunning, and it's a well
Oh,
done series. Um, and I got the link here. I'll post it. I'll post a clickable link in the show notes too,
well, if you
so
want to, I
people
can
can
read.
see that.
I can read the introduction. It's kind of what you would be
Sure.
hearing if you weren't. But the introduction to this is wells are found in our earliest histories. We find that men have been telling the story of water wells as long as they've been digging water wells. I think one of the best examples of this is the Bible. It's no wonder that wells would have such a prominent place in our most important books. Man cannot live without water. You could probably live weeks without food, but without water, that changes to days. So water is life, and we see many examples of how important water well really is in the Bible. So we use the Bible as the earliest record, and and Google searches and things is incredible how much information you can find in such short time. But we reference a lot of the Bible in all of our context of what we're trying to present on the video. Uh, we kind of just reflect a little bit on the on the on the growth of Abraham through his water wells and Isaac. They were basically water well drillers. And if you want to control somebody, if you want to get power, you do it by controlling the water. It's just like it is today. And if you're needing to protect your water, you need people to do that. If you have clean water, accessible water, you're bound to have a lot of followers. And so they use this water as a source of their power. And controlling that, protecting it from sabotage, because a lot of that went on back in those days. If you wanted to run somebody off their land, plug up their well, contaminate their well, they'd have to go somewhere else to get water. And if you want to defeat the armies, take away their water. They're going to get thirsty real fast, and they're going to be on your side. So it goes on today. Just as recently as last year, I read about some Middle East wells that were plugged in order to encourage the locals to leave. So 2,000 years later, 3,000 years later, we're doing the same thing. Water in the Middle East has always been a source of need and control.
It's a huge deal. Actually, I did a show, well, a series of shows on the geopolitics of water in Israel and Gaza and that whole area. And the politics is, it's not just that we talked about
Yeah,
the geology and then we talked about the geopolitics and it is absolutely amazing. And it
yeah,
kind of continues to this day. When the Philistines were filling in Isaac's wells, you get back to the same
oh,
situation where,
yeah,
yeah, it's a
and
fight
and
over
the back
water.
the back and forth. This well get plugged,
Yeah,
that well get plugged. They redig
yeah.
dig the well, and they and put a new well in and to plug that one up. And that's where they got all the names for these wells that today are still known, because all the wells had this character to them and the events around them. So just like we name springs and roads today, bridges, we'll name interchanges after people. Well, wells back then had the same or more impact, and so they gave them all these special names, and we go into that in the video, on how some of the wells were named, and how some of them were blessed wells and some were angry wells, and that's all reflected in how they name the wells. And one of my videos I've got that follows the wells of the Bible, it's wells of Savannah. We talk about Jasper Spring, and Jasper, being a famous colonial war hero, got a spring named after him here in Savannah, and that's why it's called Jasper Spring. So we continue to do that today also. But some of the things that I was even surprised about was how the ability of the people back thousands of years ago, before electricity, before the English language was even developed, before uh, the birth of Christ, there was all the technology that they used and the knowledge that they were able to gather to find water. It sounds simplistic, but as simply as looking out across the plain and seeing the areas of humidity coming off the ground or type of plants. That was a big ability. Oh, you notice my little get up here. Anytime I go back in time, I have a little Indiana Jones outfit I wear.
I like that.
So you always know this is my contemporary outfit right here. So this is my time travel outfit right there. They're wanting me to auction off my hat at the next Groundwater show. I don't know if I'm going to be able to do that. I like it too much.
Yeah,
But
that's
all
a
this
unique one.
this is things I'd never done before. It was blue screen and all that. I didn't know anything about all of that. And Eddie developed this blue screen. I see I get too exuberant here and I pop out my earplugs. He came up with this blue screen images, and I had to do all a lot of ad-libbing through this with this blue screen behind me. And he said, "Okay, here's what's going to be out here today," and we film it. This took about 6 months to produce this 20 minutes. We could never do Saturday Night Live. We take way too much time. But the amount
I
of
think a
time
lot
and
of
effort
people
it goes
don't
into this,
realize how much effort that goes into produce, a 20-minute clip. You got
20 minutes,
hours and hours of work, going
hours,
into that. Yeah.
and
Yeah.
without me forgetting my lines to begin with. I have the time. I'm not an actor, so I don't have the memory of the script that I probably could use. But then I just had to kind of they're about talking about the humidity coming off the ground. So he put all these special effects in. And I'm going to have to give, NASCAR, the drivers always talk about the crew and the crew chief and all the sponsors. Well, I'll tell you, I couldn't have done this without Eddie. He developed my website. Eddie, if I don't know where you are, if you're listening, but man, thank you very much for all this, for all the 4
He
chapters.
popped in
I've
with a
loved every
comment,
one of
so
them.
he must be watching. So
He must be watching someplace. Yeah.
yeah. So let's go back a little bit and talk about the actual wells of the Bible and kind of go through. I mean, I did the quote from Isaac, which is really or about Isaac, which is really one of my favorites. You know, um, how they found water but let's talk a
Well,
little bit about that story, which is really one of my favorites because Isaac. Um, he was a prolific well finder, and I like to call him the first hydrogeologist, as it were in the
and
Bible.
as we speak, here it comes up on the screen. The hydrogeology, what the way they understood it, and they didn't know
Yeah,
what they were doing, but he knew all about all this, and that's how they were so successful with the wells. Isaac was prolific at uh, finding water, and because you don't want to spend a couple of years working on a well and it comes up dry. I mean, we like to think right now that we've got all of our technology behind us, but it's still hit and miss. And
right.
you've got to take some indicators and knowledge. Now we have logs and we have the history, and we can go back and research the hydrology of an area. But back then, they were looking for clues from the surface that they were in the right area, and they weren't always successful, but uh, they had a technique that worked for them, and some of those wells still exist today. So there's magnificent construction techniques that they used, and
And
still
obviously
continue to
they
use
were all
now.
hand dug back then.
Oh yeah,
So,
picks,
shall, yeah,
shovels, buckets. They put a guy down the well. I can't imagine being out the bottom of one of these things and looking up at a pinpoint in the sky and knowing that you're looking for water down the hole like that. But um, it's simply buckets and ropes and hand tools. And as long as the area was consolidated enough, they could dig through that. If they got something unconsolidated, they'd build these brick structures like we do now with cinder casing, and
right.
they would
Well,
put the brick lining around it to hold the unconsolidated materials out.
right. And Isaac said, or Eddie says that Isaac had to redevelop many of his father's wells. So he went around and he kind of did redevelopment on
Yeah, well, he
Abram's
did,
well,
and he
Abraham's
was
wells.
trying. He's trying to establish his dominion. If you abandoned a well back then, and someone else came along and started working on the well they would claim it as their own.
Yeah.
So he had to show ownership of the wells, and that was part of the naming of it when they named the wells and the negotiations that went on over the well. When when they owned the land, they owned the well. They didn't really care about the land; they wanted the well. And so when you wanted your sheep and you wanted, hey, I want my rights to have my herd in this area, their right to that area was ownership of the well. It didn't really matter how much land the sheep
Well, the
needed.
land all over
Yeah,
the place,
yeah,
but
yeah.
it's dry, so
It's
without
dry. Yeah,
water, yeah,
yeah. Livestock take up a lot of water,
right,
and you're not gonna feed yourselves without water. So
right.
that was it was all a power grab. Uh, we think of some of these biblical characters in the sense of the biblical tradition, but in the real world where they were living, they were having to survive, and they did that by developing the wells in that area because they learned pretty quickly you weren't going to find many creeks out there.
Yeah,
So
and it and obviously oases and things like that,
yeah,
but wells, knowing where to dig, Isaac may Abraham and Isaac may have had a little bit of divine help in that, which
yeah,
we don't
yeah,
always have, but
yeah. We
but
sometimes we sometimes use the same technique. Oh God, please,
yeah, I'm praying that
I
I'm
hope
going to
this
get
works.
water
Oh please,
here.
please, I hope this works.
Yeah,
So,
exactly.
um,
But
but did, I just saw something there in the video, and I love watching this thing myself because I catch things that I forgot about sometimes. But even back
well
then,
done. It's very
yeah,
well
they're well
done.
done. Yeah,
Yeah.
thank you, thank you. But even back then, people like to throw stuff down wells, and you can go back in these old wells and find an archive of historical artifacts at the bottom of these wells, and they can sometimes find a lot about the culture by what they threw away and what they were using and disposable. So these old wells they're time capsules in a sense, uh, going back to look at them over time. So it was, yeah, it was. Again, I have to thank Eddie for doing a lot of the research on the biblical context of it. My goal was to develop something for the history of water wells. That's what the chapters are about. The world of wells. I encourage everybody to take a look at the 4 chapters are wells of the Bible, which the initial one was always so special. And it took a lot of time for 20 minutes. I think it's about 20 minutes long. Um, the verses and the the chapters from the Bible were enlightening and gave you a lot of really good perspective of what was going on back then. But also tried to bring out the importance of water later in the Bible. Jesus, when he met the Samaritan woman, and they had a debate about whether he should drink her water or not. And he told us, if you knew God, you would know that he would give you this water. He wouldn't even have to ask for it. He'd give it to you. And that's how the Samaritans, the Good Samaritans, um, the Samaritans and the Jews at the time did not get along. And he wanted to show her the love of God through the well. And the two of them had this really wonderful moment together without the politics and the religion getting in the way. Well, today we do the same thing. Where do we always meet? Whether it's at the pub, let's go have a drink someplace, or the water cooler. I sit around the water cooler at lunchtime, share stories. Uh, Water wells and the source of water has always been a center of attention and where we gather to celebrate or argue or debate. It's always around a water fountain or the pub or uh, uh, dinner. I mean, you're always looking for that center of attention. That's what a water well is.
I like that past quote there that showed up on the screen. How they named because they argued over it. They named the well Quarrel. So
Quarrel. Yeah, that was some of the unhappy names. Yeah, quarrel. And how about another one? The one that named Jealous,
yeah,
because when they put the well in, King Abimelech was jealous of the well, so they named that one Jealous. So that's they didn't have numbers for them; they had names for them, and I guess there weren't enough of them. They had no trouble saying they were like towns. This is well, a lot of towns were developed around the wells. So when this well was developed, everybody would come to it, and pretty soon you got your shops and stores and uh, bathing centers. That's what the well was. You saw these. You just saw the video there of the some. There's the one Jealous there, named Jealous. Um,
yeah. There we go.
Lots of
Jealous.
room. Yep. Uh, the, the the efforts they would go
Lots of
through to
room.
bring water to areas, these Canuck systems, where they would dig the tunnels underground and basically an underground stream to bring water to the coast where they would needed the water most from the mountain areas. Because people weren't living in the mountains; they were living on the coast for shipping and commerce and easy transportation. That's what the water was back then, was a mode of transportation. So communities
Well,
developed around the water.
right, and Jerusalem had a pretty good tunnel system. So, um,
Yeah, I who know? I have no idea how you would go about creating some of these systems, but they actually had to dig shafts, air shafts, down to the tunnel so that the workers had breathable air done in these tunnels. So you'll see about every 100 feet or so another tunnel going down, and then the other tunnel 50, 75 feet below ground, where the water was being run to the coast. But golly, the manpower, slavery.
right.
How much of the world would not be what it is today if it wasn't for slavery? And nobody will ever.
That's
But slaves were a big commodity and the source of labor back then. They were the machines back then, and people just didn't think of humans the same way we do now. Fortunately, but they were tools, and a lot of that work was done with slaves. So
interesting. So,
yeah,
So, what are some of the stories, and Eddie can chime in here too, some of the stories that really, I mean, we're flashing some of them up on the screen here. So, uh,
yeah.
but, but some of the stories really stood out to you on, on the wells and the importance of the wells. I mean, did they use the wells to irrigate, or was it more for uh, cro- uh, um, watering
I
livestock and stuff?
Yeah, I we don't see any evidence of our research of irrigation. Uh, I think the drinking water was so important, the livestock was so important, uh, that was the primary focus of the well. And I'm not saying that there's no telling how many gallons a minute some of these wells produce either. I mean, when you're feeding buckets of water, that's a lot different than feeding acres of water. And so I'm not we're not we didn't see any evidence of it for irrigation at the time, and I don't see that there's any historic reference to it either. It was mainly for drinking water, washing, bathing, uh, and livestock. So, but you mentioned some of the stories. As I already said, my favorite one was with the Sumerian woman. Um, but then after Abraham passed, when Isaac had to get back into power, and there was always they were intruders into that area, so they were always trying to justify their presence there, and that was through the drilling of the water wells. Uh, but the battles that went on were not. I imagine they were. It wasn't kind. It wasn't a kind period. Uh, these were not docile people. they they took what they wanted or had what they wanted taken, and it's a hard life to say the least. And
Yeah, and the
you can't
Philistines
judge
were always
people.
problematic in the area.
Yeah. Well, it's you can't judge people in today's morals with the past.
This is
Uh,
very true. Yeah.
there's too much that went on that we can never understand, and without going into the politics of today, some of the things are the same, unfortunately. But our effort was to make the Bible uh, a source of pride and knowledge for the water well driller. Uh, Eddie did it. He did an incredible amount of research on this and presented it to me and said, "Yeah, let's do this. Let's go. Let's take that step." I had no idea it would lead to where it has. So if you wanted a biblical historian, I'm not me. That's not me. I'm not a biblical historian. Okay, but I like the stories. I like retelling and making people aware of the history of water wells and the importance of it. So you're probably much more of an authority on certain chapters of the Bible than I could ever hope to be. Uh, uh, but there is knowledge in there and what I presented to people, and I'm trying to present it in a way that keeps people's interest. As I said, I'm not a biblical theorist, but there's enough there in today's language. Now, we just used the English version of the Bible, which is easy to understand. We took our phrases from that. We did the research on what's the history of wells in the Bible and grasped that and pulled together the best things we could. And I didn't intend to be an authority on the Bible, but bringing out some of the history for the current theory of water well drilling and where it came from.
God will sometimes steer you in those directions, but I
Yeah,
do like the historical. I mean,
yeah,
it's amazing to me that people discount the Bible really as a historical document, but most stuff has proven to be, and they keep finding archaeological evidence that supports the account of the Bible. I was just reading something the other day about the Assyrians and their siege of Jerusalem, how people had discounted this whole thing, and now they're finding
yeah,
archaeological evidence to support that. And the same,
yeah,
the same thing with so many things like the wells and all that is part of the history, and it is. I'm fascinated with. I love the Old Testament
yeah,
historical books just because of the history and
yeah,
yeah, I really like the hydrogeology because I'm a hydrogeologist,
yeah.
but there's so much history and depth there that is just truly
Yeah,
amazing.
I don't see the problem with developing a lifestyle based on the teachings of a book that tries to make you do the right thing.
Yeah,
Okay,
exactly.
is it any more complicated than that? You know, it's
People try to make it more complicated, but
just do the right
but
thing. Yeah,
but you're exactly right, and that's
yeah,
it. But
yeah,
just this historical aspect, though,
yeah,
you know, if
yeah,
nothing else, there's all that, and there's just such a breadth and depth of history there, and the wells is
yeah.
part of it, and that
Well,
that's
yeah, and you see the continuation of that today with the battles over oil. Uh, but water's more important than oil. I
it
said you
is.
can't drink oil. So people, I say, hey man, if we find oil, can we split it? I said, you don't want to find oil under your property. You're going to have the EPA out here in about 10 minutes. There's no oil is not the
Yeah,
big thing here. It's
yeah.
water. Water's more important than oil. If we just don't market it as well. If we were Chevron water well drilling, I think we could charge by the gallon, not by the foot.
Well, you know what? And that is the contrast. Back then in Isaac's day, he understood the importance of water. Everybody understood the
Yeah.
importance of water. Today, most people are a little spoiled. They go and they turn on their tap, and clean water comes out, and they don't even think about it. Where's that water coming from? Nobody
Well,
has a clue.
How many people
Yeah.
think, oh, well, we don't have any water shortage. They got
Yeah.
plenty of water down at Kroger's.
Yeah.
They got
Yeah.
bottled water down there. I said, well, you know that bottled water would be called spring water, and I might be mistaken exactly, uh, but only 10% of the water has to be actually from a well. It can be city water that's been filtered and put in the bottle. And
Yep.
people think they're drinking pristine water out of a well someplace or out of a spring. And it's not the case usually. It's not a very big percentage of the water is any different than the water you're getting out of your tap
Yeah.
when it goes in the water bottle. But they, oh, we're not out of water. We got plenty of water. Let's ship it down from Kroger's.
Yeah.
So
Yeah.
it's
There's plenty of water.
it's yeah, it's valuable. The Bible teaches us a lot of things, but if you look into some of the details, there are a lot of other lessons in there besides some of the theory. It's
Right.
the history of the world. That's what the Bible is. It's a history of the world. As what as
Well,
and we didn't have videos back then, so this is the only way they had to do it. They told the
right.
stories and passed down the stories. Did the stories
Right.
get embellished? Yeah, probably. Did the stories get changed a little bit? It can happen pretty easily, but the basics of the stories the same, and it's consistent throughout history. And I don't care whether the Hindus or the Muslims or the Jews or the Christians, the basic premise of the Bible holds true through all those religions. Uh,
Right. Well, and
Abraham being the trifecta of every religion. If you want to talk Christianity, Judaism, or Muslims, they all refer to Abraham. He's the common man in all of these stories in our Bible, and that's what we go back to in the world of Wells is the history of Abraham and Isaac. So we could probably do 3-hour chapter on Wells of the Bible,
yeah.
uh, but I didn't have 4 years to do it, so I only had
Yeah, that's 20-minute video for
20-minute
multiple
video for
days.
6 months.
Yeah.
Yeah,
Yeah.
believe it or not, I actually have a job too, and
Yeah.
we
Yeah.
try to put,
Most of us
put
still have to
wells
work.
in
Yeah.
from time to time,
Exactly.
try to pay the bills.
But,
So
I mean, you talk about, and Eddie talked about hydraulic despotism, which really
hydraulic,
is true,
isn't that? I
is,
love that little phrase of his, the
yeah,
hydraulic despotism. Yeah,
yeah,
despotism.
let me
It's
pop that
incredible.
comment back up here. So,
Yeah,
and it is true because you
I'm
go
reading it
back to
here now. Yep.
Isaac and the Philistines followed behind him and they kept filling in his wells. And,
Yep.
because they knew that water was power and control.
Yep.
But Isaac was so prolific at finding wells that they finally just gave up,
Yeah.
But
And
today
yeah.
we go back to we look at, Israel and the Palestinians and stuff. Israel control, like on the West Bank, for instance, Israel controls the water and how the Palestinians can drill wells and stuff. So it is a form of power and
Yep.
control still,
Yeah. It was it
all
was
through
it,
time.
it was Israel that plugged the well there in Gaza
Right.
recently to make them leave.
Yeah.
Well,
So
still works.
and you go back to the Philistines doing that to Isaac,
Yeah.
and now you got
Yeah.
Israel doing it to the
Yeah.
Palestinians,
Three
so
thousand years
turnabout, I
later.
guess.
Yep. It's
And
it's
so,
still happening. Yep.
yeah, so,
But
yeah, the more things change, the more they stay the same is really what
yeah.
it comes down to. So
So,
so
well, I
what
hope
were
that go ahead.
oh,
Sorry.
no, go ahead, what you were saying,
I
and
was
then I
going to
got
say,
a question.
I said, well, I just that I hope that people watch it, um, that they appreciate how far we've come and how hard it was for people back then, and don't judge people in history. You can't judge history. It's what happened. It's what it is. You just have to realize our mistakes and be better people in the future. And
Right.
the Bible is about power and struggle and battles and fighting armies. Um, that's not unique to today's culture. Um, I think as long as we're human and you have one person that wants your stuff, we're never going to have peace.
Right.
You just had to be prepared to protect what's yours and hope for the best. So I think that's part of the story about what the world of wells is about is respecting how hard it has been to be a well driller and what they've had to do protect their property. So that's kind of, if I had one message from the whole series, it would be uh, water wells need to be protected. The water needs to be protected, and you need to be able to control your your the water as a incredibly important commodity in the world. So let's protect it. Amen.
Good sound advice. Amen. All right.
There.
With that,
Okay.
we can kind of wrap things up here. I am going to bring up your contact information here
Oh, great. Thank you.
and
Yeah.
how to, what's the best, here's your all your information. Your World of Wells video documentary series is on your website, and I put the
Yes, it
website up
is.
there.
Yes, it is.
And there's other videos too. They're all really well done. I've watched them all.
Oh, good.
So what where's your area of operations, and and what what's your primary I know you do the shallow wells, but
Yeah.
what's your area of operations? How do you operate,
Well,
and that
well,
type of thing?
what's a shallow well here would be a deep well. Some other places, we define a shallow well as anything above the Miocene layer of the Hawthorne Formation in Savannah. So ours is strictly a rainwater percolation source. Whereas when you get down to the limestone at 250, 300 feet, 400 feet here, and down in the Florida aquifer, uh, that's an artesian flow from the PEM um, up near Macon, the Piedmont area, up towards northern Georgia. But that source of water is not recharged locally. So when people are watering the grass with their drinking water here, does not return to the source because it's separated by that bed of Miocene. Uh, Whereas shallow well water, 60% of the water used goes back into the ground. Oh, you're about to be invaded here. Excuse me, my cat. Um,
An extra guest.
that was Junior. He likes to be in the middle of things, and he's a little mad at me right now because I haven't been paying attention to him. But shallow wells are recharged by local rainfall, so 60% of the water that you use goes back in the ground, and it's a recycling. It's recycled water. And I tell people come to me, well, do you need a rain barrel? Is that any good? I said, just put in a well. It's the same thing. You're collecting water from the ground from the rain. So we operate in up and down the coast of what would they consider the northeast of Georgia, which is about 100 miles from the southeast. But up near Savannah, uh, we work up and down Chatham County, Liberty County, Long County, McIntosh County. We got about maybe a 60-mile, 100-mile radius where we work. I get beyond that, I'm like a fish out of water.
Yeah.
What I do well. What I don't know, I don't profess to know. And we try to keep my little niche here in shallow wells for irrigation purposes. And I like to think that with the control of the deeper water, with the Florida aquifer restrictions by the EPD, we offer a ecologically sound alternative to using that water. And without shallow wells, that really, frankly, nobody was even developing shallow wells here until my father-in-law started it 40 years ago. There was no market for it, and there were some hand-dug driven wells, but nobody doing it commercially. And uh, we were saving, literally millions and millions of gallons, if not even higher than that, from the aquifer every day. And that's water that's being conserved in the Florida aquifer that the shallow wells provide for. So our wells at 60, 70, 80 feet are just as good as wells anywhere else in the country that are 200 or 300, 400 feet. Um, the water for generations has been used for drinking water, but now it's just used for irrigation. And not because anything's happened to it, it's just people have a better source with the Florida aquifer. So let's
Right.
protect the Florida aquifer and don't be putting drinking water on the ground. It's a waste of water.
There.
It's a
Absolutely.
waste.
Absolutely.
Yep. So that's
I
kind
got to
of
think
that's kind
about
of my
that.
mantra around here. Is I've got an ecological background. I'm a zoologist. I worked out at the Institute of Oceanography, so we did marine research. My background is environmental, and I would never get involved in something that I thought was in contrast to that. So I'm not an ecologist in the sense that I'm not an activist, but I certainly understand the importance. A lot of people misunderstand. Well, just because we're a certain political nature doesn't mean we don't care about nature. It's just we have a perspective, and we want to protect it and enjoy it, but we also have to use it. So that's been my philosophy all my life.
Exactly. Mr. McClain, thank you very much for your time and sharing your knowledge. And I will post all this stuff up in the show notes and the link to the to your website and the video series, which are on Rumble.
Okay.
And this has been awesome, and
Yeah.
I would urge everybody to go and watch the full video with sound. We weren't able to get the
Yeah, we're
sound
sound.
piped in here. I'm sure
Yeah,
there's a way to do that, and I thought I had it working, but
yeah,
that's
yeah.
that's the that's
You
the
get a
deal with
chance
going
to
live.
you get a chance to listen to more of me not make any sense. So, I
Yeah, that's
appreciate you
great.
reaching out. You're doing a great job for the industry. Uh, it's people like yourself that bring awareness to what we do, and that's our job is to protect the industry too. And you're doing a great job with that. Thank you.
All right. Well, thank you very much. We'll get this posted up, and you have a great day and
Take
back
care.
at it. All
Okay, so
right.
long. Bye.
All right, great conversation. I would urge everybody to go and watch the full video with sound, and it's just and there's some other documentaries there on their website too, the Florida and Aquifer and some other stuff that is really well done. And we appreciate Mr. McClain coming on and spending his time with us. So that is the show for today. We do this every Thursday, 11 a.m. Central Time. So we will look forward to seeing you next week.